What we're going to be going over here is research and development activities and costs, and what would be included here in these research and development activities. It's commonly referred to here as R&D, and R&D costs are not themselves intangible assets. They often result here in the development of patents or copyrights, and that would be new products, processes, ideas, and so forth. That provide future value that are intangible assets here. That is, these patents here and copyrights. Okay, the costs associated with R&D activities and the accounting treatment. We'll just look at the 5 categories here. So first here, materials, equipment, and facilities here directly related here to R&D. You'd expense the entire cost unless the items have alternative future uses. If there are alternative future uses, carry them as inventory and allocate as consumed, or capitalize and depreciate as used here for R&D expenses here. Number 2 here, for personnel involved, expense as incurred here the salaries, wages, or other related costs of personnel engaged in R&D. They have to be engaged here, directly related here to the R&D activity here. Now, for purchased intangibles here, you recognize and measure at their fair value, account for in accordance with their use, either as limited life or indefinite life intangibles. Now, these purchased intangibles, they are not involve any, well, they may involve R&D activities, but they're accounted for separately here. They wouldn't be included in the R&D capitalization or anything like that. Now, for contract services, that is, you contract out your R&D activities. You expense the costs of the services performed by others in connection with the R&D incurred. So if the company contracts it out, then you would still be expensing these services here under the R&D accounts here. And then indirect costs. You include a reasonable allocation of the indirect costs in the R&D costs here that would be involved, except for general and administrative costs, which must be clearly related to R&D in order to be included here in any R&D costs or expenses. Okay, let's go look here at the example of what would be included in R&D expenses, and these are just typical examples here. Now, we would capitalize and depreciate as R&D expense here. Number 1, the construction of long-term research facilities for the use of current and future R&D projects, or 2 here, acquisition of R&D equipment for use in the current and future R&D projects. So these would be capitalized here and depreciated, and then we'd record them here as an R&D expense here on the income statement. Now, expense immediately as R&D expenses here. So look at our 5 items here. Acquisition of R&D equipment for use on the current project only. So it's currently just used on the current project here. And number 2, salaries for research staff designing new equipment or processes or improvements to the current equipment or processes here. 3, materials, labor, overhead costs for the design of prototypes. 4, costs for testing, prototype, and design modifications here. Number 5, engineering costs incurred to bring the product or process to the full production stage. So these are the items here that would be expensed immediately here as R&D expense here on our income statement. And then this is where we'd be inventorying and allocating to R&D projects here, and we'd be expensing them as used. And those would be like purchase materials here for use on current and future R&D projects. So this, we would be putting them just in an inventory and allocating them out as we use them here to R&D expenses. Now, these would be examples of what's not included in R&D expenses here. Number 1 here, research, contract services for other companies. That would be like an accounts receivable. Say, for example, you've got a research department, an R&D department here, but you're contracting it out to other companies. So those wouldn't be included, even though it's the research and development department or whatever, but you wouldn't be recording them as a research and development cost here for the company. Those would just be an accounts receivable. Okay, 2, in this case, we'd be looking at patent legal fees, registration fees, consulting fees, and successful legal defense costs here of a patent. And this would be capitalized under a patent or expensed under a patent in some fashion here, but they wouldn't be directly recorded here as R&D expenses. They would be assigned to a patent expense of some sort. And number 3 here, executive salaries and others not related to the R&D activities. Even though the executives, and there's a lot of other salaried people that are working in the company here, but if they're not directly tied into this R&D department or activity, then you wouldn't be recording them here as an R&D expense. They'd just be like an operating expense here. And number 4, marketing research to promote a new product here that might be going through research and development here, but because it's not directly it's not considered an R&D expense. It would be like an operating expense here. And number 5 here, like commissions and salesmen's salaries or salespeople's salaries here for the new product that's being developed. Again, it's not a direct relationship here to R&D. You would just be expensing it out here as an operating expense. So we've just gone through some basic examples here, just going back here again here. What examples, what would be included in R&D expenses? You can look through them again here, where you capitalize and depreciate as an R&D expense, showing these items, and then items here that we'd expense out immediately as R&D expenses. And we have shown here. And then there's the case here where you're probably going to use them in R&D projects here, but you would inventory them and allocate them out, inventory the items here, and like purchase materials, so forth here, and you'd just allocate them out here to the R&D project, and then you'd expense them out as used. So just a rough idea here of what's involved in R&D and the basic accounting that you would use for research and development.